The story starts with our MC, Ayase Yudo, watching a magical girl anime called Clumsy Aki-chan, despite admitting that he is not interested in watching it. Downstairs, his sister Ruko and homeroom teacher Yukari are indulging themselves in alcohol, even though it's 3 a.m. in the morning. As he remarks on how a person has the ability to watch anime at such hours of the day, a girl is seen with a smile on her face as Aki-chan's face flashes on the TV screen. The following morning, Yudo is preparing breakfast, while Ruko and Yukari are left sleeping from their drinking party. The two manage to wake up in time for breakfast, but they both participated in tormenting Yudo in their own way. Later on, in Hakuju Academy, Yudo encounters classmates Nagai, Takanami, and Ogawa, who remark on his opinion on women. This was suddenly interrupted by the sound of someone playing the piano. More specifically, it was fellow classmate called Haruka behind the piano. She seems to be admired by many of the students for her expertise. MC soon reached his classroom, and there, he had a chance of seeing Haruka mingling with her friends when Nobunaga interrupted him, the topic shifting to yesterday's episode of Dojiko Aki-chan and his anime-related interests. The topic of an anime magazine called Innocent Smile inside the school library seemed to arouse Haruka's interest, which ends up startling her friends. At the end of the day's class, Yudo is asked by Nobunaga to return the book he borrowed from the library, which is the Dojiko Aki-chan issue of Innocent Smile. He receives a warning from the librarian in the place of the borrower and heads off immediately. On his way out, he notices a girl sneaking inside with her face covered by her school bag. He instantly recognizes it as Nobuzaka Haruka, who borrows a copy of Innocent Smile. As she leaves, though, she bumps Yudo, whom she then asks about what she just did. She also tried sneaking out from him, but she ends up losing her balance. MC manages to get hold of the book she borrowed, much to the remorse of Haruka. She leaves the library in tears. In the following days, Haruka seems to avoid MC. He notices this and begins to wonder why. He tries to talk to her personally, but her tendency to run away from him only worsens his image, especially to those who admire Haruka. He manages to reach Haruka on the rooftop. There, he admits that he will not expose her hobby to anyone and reassures her feelings about having such a hobby. That night, he receives a call from Haruka, who admits she forgot to return the Innocent Smile magazine she borrowed. She remembers that people with overdue books have their names announced all over the school, and her image will be tarnished when it happens. Yudo and Haruka meet at the school, sneaking in so that they can return the book before it is overdue. Inside, Haruka exposes her tendency to be airheaded and clumsy. Much to MC's relief, he describes Haruka as weird. They then manage to complete the requirements in returning the magazine safely when the sound of a cat's purring echoed throughout the library. Haruka suspected it was a ghost cat that has been haunting the school as a ghost story. MC decides to investigate, however. Luckily for them, it was their teacher Yukari's phone, whose ringtone is a cat purring. Outside the school, Haruka extends her thanks for MC's help and allows him to call her by her first name. Yudo also returns the favor by allowing her to call him in his. They then start their first day as friends and go to school together. However, this was unfavorable to Haruka's most loyal fans, who stalked them on their way to school. After escaping the wrath of Haruka's fans, Yudo receives a favor from Haruka. She asks Yudo to accompany her on Sunday to buy something. Yudo agrees, though he is nervous at the thought of it, since most people would assume that they are dating. Haruka also admits that she plans on going alone to Akihabara, where Yudo had bad memories with his friend Nobunaga. That Sunday, Haruka and MC meet up and proceed to Akihabara. Haruka plans on roaming around the different stores before going for a newly unveiled portable gaming console, showing a map of the different places she wants to go. Yudo realizes that Haruka does have some weaknesses as well, pertaining to drawing, but keeps his opinion to himself. As they proceeded in roaming around Akihabara, they stopped by a few shops before going to a store named Torinoona, a large store for anime merchandise. Haruka stumbles upon an aisle full of fan-made comics called doujinshi and almost faints at the contents of one comic she skimmed. It has elements of shounen. Yudo drags Haruka out of the store, and they later arrive at Anime, another store with goods dedicated to anime merchandise. He then realizes that Haruka likes many of the merchandise displayed, yet does not buy them. The two approach their last destination when Haruka sees models of Dojiko Aki-chan displayed in a nearby shop. Yudo finally confronts Haruka on her thriftiness and admits that she does not have any money. She then recollects her first days as an akibake and the boy who handed her the first issue of Innocent Smile. Soon, Nobunaga sees MC and approaches him. He voices out his surprise at seeing him in Akihabara, considering what happened before. He later leaves for a DVD sale at another store and leaves MC desperate in search of Haruka, who went missing. In his search for Haruka, he bumps into a girl with purplish pink hair. He receives some teasing from that girl and heads off when she points out Haruka's last seen location. MC manages to find her, but she is cornered by a group of muscular men. He assumes that they are the bad guys and proceeds to protect Haruka, but she dispels his suspicion. It seems like they are lost and were having difficulty communicating due to their language. Haruka manages to bridge the gap and help the men, and they leave at once. Afterward, Haruka invites Yudo inside a gachapon hall. Yudo cheers Haruka as she tries gachapon for the first time, and she ends up spending a lot of money without getting what she wanted. Soon they arrive at home cafe for lunch. It is one of the many maid cafes in Akihabara, a fact that Yudo overlooked at first. After double-checking the signage outside, he was welcomed by Haruka, who was dressed by the other waitresses in a maid costume. The other waitresses then take pictures of them and hand out copies for Yudo and Haruka to enjoy. Haruka and Yudo reach their last destination, where they are told that they are sold out, much to Haruka's shock. The shock left her unable to stand, so Yudo decides to do a lover's carry to Haruka, which attracted applause from nearby people. Yudo finally manages to rest after carrying Haruka, who broods over what happened earlier. Yudo cheers him up and tells him that he enjoys the trip nonetheless. Yudo somewhat remembers doing the same thing in the past and was interrupted by a message from his sister. On their way back to the train station, Yudo asks Haruka to try gachapon one more time. She ends up getting a Dojiko Aki-chan keychain, much to Haruka's joy. She treasures it as a gift from Yudo himself, and Yudo blurts out his promise to accompany Haruka again in Akihabara. The final exams draw near at Hakuju Academy, and Haruka decides to invite Yudo to her house for a pair study session. Yudo accepts her offer, but ends up getting lost due to Haruka's hand-drawn map of her house the next day. Later, he meets a girl with ponytailed hair who gave him a better map towards his destination. She leaves shortly after, telling him of her anticipation of seeing him later. Yudo reaches Haruka's house and, for a few moments, was shocked at the sheer size of Haruka's residence. He is then welcomed by a serious-looking woman dressed in a maid costume who guides him on the way toward Haruka's house. After a long and seemingly exhausting walk, Yudo and his guide arrive at Haruka's room, where Haruka herself welcomes Yudo. Yudo manages to shrug off the fatigue the half-hour walk gave him, but admits that it was a difficult feat, a feat that doesn't even affect his guide. Before the maid leaves for their tea, Haruka introduces her as Sakurazaka Hazuki, the head maid of the family. Upon entering Haruka's enormous room, Yudo notices the clear lack of anime merchandise. Haruka tells him that it is because her hobby is a secret, even to his parents. Soon, Haruka and Yudo begin studying. Despite his eagerness, Yudo was constantly thinking dirty thoughts, mostly because Haruka's parents are away. This escalates to Yudo's and Haruka's faces becoming intimately close when the former's eraser accidentally fell from the table and both reached for it. Their moment was interrupted by a loud bang on the door. Hazuki watched as the girl Yudo met earlier and a different maid fell to the floor. Out of shock, Haruka and Yudo unwillingly exposed the closeness between them by calling each other by their first names. After the new faces apologize, they introduce themselves as Nagizaka Maika, Haruka's younger sister, and Nanashiro Nanami, third ranking of the Nagizaka family maids. Maika decides to talk to Yudo about Haruka's secret and how her sister was acting lately. Yudo tried to deny what she knew, but Maika soon shows her sincerity to Yudo. Micah admits that she knows of her sister's hobby, and her father is the only one oblivious to the situation. The younger Nojizaka then asks him to promise to never abandon her sister, which he affirms. The final exams ended the next day. After the grueling test, Haruka takes the time to invite Yudo to Natsukomi. It means the summer comic hit. Yudo decides to join her in the Odaiba-held event. Suddenly, an accident caused Haruka's bag to spill its contents. It had a catalog for the upcoming Natsukomi. The shock from the sudden exposure caused her to skip class for the next few days. On the third day, Yudo recollects on what happened to Haruka. After the Comiket catalog was exposed to the students, Yudo manages to divert the blame to himself by telling the witnesses that he himself owned the catalog. Because of this, he endures the day, becoming a source of disgust for the rest of the class. That night, Yudo visits Haruka, only to be confronted by Nanami, Hazuki, and Micah. MC tells them what really happened, and they were relieved to find out that her secret is still safe. Though she stayed inside her room for 3 days, Micah manages to lure out Haruka by using Yudo as bait, but Haruka closes her room yet again due to embarrassment. Yudo stops Hazuki from using her personal chainsaw to break through Haruka's room and talks to Haruka about the incident. Yudo also remembers Micah's confession about Haruka's past, which involved her secret being exposed to her classmates in middle school and being an outcast because of it. Later, Yudo enters Haruka's room to talk to her personally. Haruka expresses her concern for Yudo now that he shoulders the treatment of being an otaku on her behalf. Yudo assures Haruka that he is fine. Despite being treated badly by his classmates, he points out that she is not alone. He is by her side, and he promises to never leave her whatever happens. Haruka talks to Yudo about Hazuki. She tells him that the head family maid has been acting strangely. Yudo, however, has no idea about Hazuki since he admits he doesn't see any difference in her expressions. Nanami and Mika soon join their discussion, and they voice out their opinions on what's going on with Hazuki, which leaves Yudo oblivious. Since he does not know Hazuki much, and thus has no idea about her situation until they pointed it out. As Hazuki leaves the estate for personal business, the others take the chance to find out more about Hazuki. Upon closely following Hazuki's footsteps, they found her inside a store for stuffed toys. Haruka then points out that Hazuki loves stuffed toys and has a large collection in her room. Later, Hazuki leaves the shop with a large stuffed toy rabbit. Yudo then is seen by his friend Nobunaga, who asks curiously about his clothes and the people behind him, especially Haruka, whose clothing is easily identified by Nobunaga as a uniform from Misaki High School. All of a sudden, Nanami uses her voice to trick Nobunaga into leaving. Soon, Hazuki enters a shopping mall. They followed her in and discovered that the mall itself is dedicated to women's apparel. Out of embarrassment, Yudo volunteers to wait outside. It was there that he accidentally bumps into the same girl, which he met at Akihabara. The girl jokes again about Yudo having a date with Haruka. She points out that their meeting twice in the same manner was something unusual. As she leaves Yudo, Haruka calls to him. Haruka decides to leave the investigation to her sister and Nanami. She tells Yudo that she does not want him to wait alone. Soon, Hazuki leaves the mall without Nanami and Micah tailing her. With time running out, Yudo and Haruka decide to lead the investigation on behalf of the other two, who had themselves immersed in shopping due to a bargain sale. After escaping from their drunk teacher Yukari, Yudo drags Haruka elsewhere, realizing that they lost Hazuki's location. Luckily, they manage to see her in a cafe nearby. While they wait outside, Yudo is seen by her elder sister Ruko, who is dressed like a waiter. She tells Yudo that she is there for a wine sampling party and had invited Yukari to come along, only to lose her after being drunk. Ruko then asks about Haruka, whom she knew about from Yukari, and her relationship with Yudo. Despite denying any deep relationship between them, Ruko notices how defensive he was towards Haruka. With that, she tells Haruka to take care of his brother, whom she cares very much, despite treating him otherwise. The stalking continues with Hazuki meeting a man in a suit. Haruka suspects the man to be involved with Hazuki romantically, but MC still keeps an open mind. Upon closer inspection, they find out that Haruka was looking at wedding dresses. Wanting to get some answers, Haruka decides to follow Hazuki inside the building. There, a woman appears and asks them to go inside. Yudo and Haruka find themselves inside a bridal shop, being dressed as a bride and groom. The two are clearly embarrassed towards each other as the photographer prays how they look good together. Soon, the employees discover there has been a mix-up, and the real couple to be dressed for the pictorial has just arrived. They decide to give Yudo and Haruka their services for free because of the confusion. Before they leave, they receive a picture of them in their wedding attire. In the end, they lost Hazuki. Haruka realizes they might be a hindrance to her willingness to be married. She then tells Yudo that it is alright for Hazuki to quit and search for her own happiness. That night, at the Nagizaka residence, Haruka finally confronts Hazuki about her problem. Haruka explains what she understood about what she saw that day and tells her about her intention to be married. Hazuki was puzzled about what she said. Hazuki tells them that she was going to the hardware store upstairs from the bridal shop to buy a new chain for her chainsaw, and the man who welcomed her was in fact the manager of the hardware store. That made the two embarrassed about the misunderstanding. Hazuki, though, saw this as a show of care for her, which she was grateful about. Later, Mika and Nanami arrive with bags full of clothing from the mall. They give a small box of underwear to Haruka, who runs to hide it from MC. As she approaches her younger sister, their picture with MC flew off and was picked up by Mika, who started to tease the two for posing as bride and groom. On his way to school, Yudo bumps into the same girl he has met twice before. This time, though, she wears the uniform of Hakuju Academy. That day, she introduces herself as the newest student in Yudo's class, Shina Amamiya. Her arrival cheered up the boys of the class, all except Yudo, who has grown accustomed to her. Later that day, Shina is shown to quickly blend herself into the class while showing her skills in English, sports, cooking, and social interaction. Shina also reveals that she is a fan of Haruka herself, as she knew that Haruka has participated as the representative of Japan in a major piano contest. Shina then makes friends with Haruka. Yukari, their homeroom teacher, announces the upcoming swimming competition the week after. It will require everyone to join in at least one event, much to the surprise of the class. Within the brewing discussion among classmates, Shina clearly shows her nervousness towards the upcoming event. Despite this, she decides to do the relay with two of her classmates. She confronts Yudo and Haruka. She confesses that swimming is one of the things she is not good at, and admits that her decision was meant to not disappoint anyone. The two agree to help out Shina by holding a practice session inside the school. On the day of Shina's training session, Yudo and Haruka started out their training smoothly, with Yudo momentarily focusing too much on Haruka while wearing a swimsuit. Soon they are joined by Yukari, who was sporting her new revealing swimsuit. Hazuki and Nanami was preparing food for the training. Ruko and Mika also added to Yudo's worries. Shina, however, does not mind them and instead feels amused at their antics with Yudo and Haruka. Mika proceeds to tease Yudo yet again, while her elder sister tries to keep her sneaky tactics at bay. The family maids of Haruka relax under the summer heat, and Ruko and Yukari indulge themselves in alcohol and grilled food. The day before the competition arrives, as a final practice run, Shina goes for one lap at the school's swimming pool. Haruka and Yudo cheer Shina on as she swims for the first time unassisted. At the end of the lap, she was welcomed by the two, who congratulated her for her achievement. The next day, the swimming competition finally starts. Shina feels the pressure of watching the events unfold and decides to leave to take a shower before the relay event. Yudo follows her and cheers her up for one last time before she leaves for her turn to compete. The relay starts off and Shina's team went at a steady pace throughout the event. Haruka and Yudo gave their support from the bleachers as Shina's turn is up. As she reaches the last part of the lap, she feels a cramp on her leg, which brought her below the water, but our MC manages to save her in time. Shina loses consciousness. When Shina comes, she finds herself in the school infirmary, where Yukari massages her leg to ease the pain the cramp has brought. She then leaves Shina to Yudo, telling him that she manages to not drink any water in her ordeal, and that his presence is needed as she was still in shock over what happened. Yudo goes to check Shina, who was going to change into her uniform. He catches him on a bad time and ends up looking away at an almost undressed Shina. She, however, tells him not to leave. Draping herself with the curtains, which cover the infirmary bed, she apologizes for not making it to the event. Yudo assures her and tells her not to apologize because she has not done anything wrong. Later on, the rest of the section went to check if she is alright. Later that afternoon, Haruka tells Nanami to drive Shina home. Despite her doubts about accepting the offer, Yudo just tells her to do so as they are worried about her safety. Nanami then speeds off towards Shana's house, causing Yudo to worry a bit towards Shana. Haruka assures him about Nanami's driving and tells him that she is handy when in a hurry. As Shana makes her way home, she thinks about Yudo and tells herself that something might really happen in the end. Haruka and Yudo walk home, and they talk about the preparations for the upcoming summer comic kit, including Haruka's plans of making a personal guidebook for Yudo to use in the event. The topic soon shifts to his heroic deed of saving Shina, remarking that he was cool at that moment. Haruka, however, shows a hint of jealousy. Yudo then tells Haruka that he will do the same if ever she drowns. This relieved Haruka, who showed a bright smile as she and MC heads off home. As the day of Comiket draws near, Yudo and Nobunaga meet in a fast food restaurant. Nobunaga briefs Yudo on what Comiket is and what to expect from it and lends him a copy of the official handbook for the event. Yudo, as a first-timer, has unusual ideas about what a Comiket is. Nobunaga, however, warns him to not take the Comiket lightly. After turning down Shina's offer of a swimming party on the day of the Comiket, he remembers an earlier meeting with Haruka, where he receives a similar handbook to Nobunaga's with her personal touch. Also, she explains to him what to do in the event itself. She also tells Yudo that she wants to attend to buy a doujinshi from a certain artist. In the end, as he finds Nobunaga's manual too extravagant, he chooses to focus on Haruka's manual. The day after, the day of the Comiket, Yudo endures a bus ride with passengers filling the underground train to the brim and finds himself lost in a sea of people overflowing to the station itself. He manages to meet up with Haruka inside the station. Soon, they realize the sheer number of people coming to the Comiket. Also, Yudo realizes too late that he should have taken Nobunaga's advice seriously. Because Yudo manages to reach the big site through the first train ride, he and Haruka are stuck in the line of attendees. Yudo suggests rushing to get in, but Haruka reminds him of the rules that should be followed within the event. After some time, she and Yudo finally reach the entrance of the big site. Haruka decides to go for the doujinshi first, as what she experienced last time has taught her to be less impatient about the destination. The big site proves to be a difficult place to maneuver due to the volume of people walking inside. Haruka met some accidents on the way, and Yudo decides to offer his hand to her literally. Though equally embarrassed about it, they decide to hold hands along the way. Inside the part of the big site where the doujinshi circles are situated, Haruka is overwhelmed by the number of anime series, which has participant doujinshi. Yudo manages to remind her of the Nekobasu doujinshi, and they headed off there at once. When they reach the stall where the doujinshi is sold, they are asked to follow a long line of buyers. After a long time of waiting, they are left with one copy, which ends up in the hands of another customer. Despite Yudo's attempts to reconsider, Haruka tells him that it is fine. Yudo apologizes and they leave off disappointed. Outside, a man calls them and gives them a copy of the same book. Though they are surprised, they accept it wholeheartedly. As he leaves, Hazuki and Mika welcome him back. In fact, it is Nanami dressed as someone popular. Later on, they took the day roaming around the doujinshi stalls. Haruka soon tells Yudo that she wants to become a doujinshi artist, to which he responds with mixed feelings, since he knows how Haruka draws things. After momentarily meeting Nobunaga in the middle of the crowd, he rejoins Haruka as she continues to browse the stalls. There, she curiously scanned the contents of an Inukami doujinshi, which has elements of yaoi in it. Haruka consequently loses consciousness. Later, she regains consciousness elsewhere, where she asks about what happened between the characters in the doujinshi she read. Yudo did not manage to answer her question. In another part of the big site, Yudo finds Haruka unconscious again after catching a glimpse of a character from an Ero manga. Yudo brings Haruka outside where she comes to. After giving her some refreshments, they notice a large number of people taking pictures of people wearing a certain attire. Those who wore costumes of familiar anime characters aroused her interest, so Haruka decides to take a look herself. Soon, photographers fixed their attention to Haruka instead, as her outfit made it look like she was cosplaying as well. Yudo senses trouble and goes to fetch Haruka, but persistent photographers block their way out. All of a sudden, Hazuki appears cosplaying as the titular character in Bokusatsu Dokuro-chan and uses her chainsaw to slice through the cameras. Then Meika and Nanami, dressed as Hikate and Wilhelmina Carmel from Shakugen no Shana respectively, who deals with the others with a bunch of ribbons. Unfortunately, they are forced to flee when one of the volunteers saw and apprehended them, as they do not have passes to participate. With the problem averted, Haruka thanks Yudo for being heroic. On the way back, Haruka joins Yudo on the train. Inside, Haruka continues to thank Yudo for the chance to join her in the comic kit. Then, after reaching her house, the two part ways. On his way back home, Yudo meets Maika, Hazuki, and Nanami, whom he recognized back at the commotion at the comic kit. Maika then asks Yudo about seeing an excessively rough man in the comic kit, which he answers with no. Maika shows a slight tone of concern but manages to shift it away from Yudo's focus. That night, Yudo comes home after a visit to the convenience store. He receives a phone call from a distressed Maika. The sound of the doorbell follows shortly, and behind the door to the Ayase residence is a teary-eyed Haruka. Her worst nightmare has arrived, as his father discovers her secrets by using one of his men to stalk Haruka inside the comic kit. He orders his personal hellhounds guards to retrieve Haruka in whatever means possible. Meanwhile, Haruka breaks the bad news to MC. After the comic kit, she found her father waiting for her, and all the merchandise she did before and the things she bought from comic kit were scattered to the floor. Hazuki soon arrives at the Ayase residence and announces her support for Haruka. She also decides to stay with her to act as a bodyguard like always. Ruko and Yukari emerges from the living room and announces that they approve Haruka's overnight stay. To celebrate for her first day inside the Ayase residence, Yudo, Ruko, and Yukari prepare some food for Haruka. There, Hazuki notices Yudo's potential as a good husband due to his cooking prowess. With this, we end our video. Stay tuned for the next part and watch our other quality contents. Stay safe. Bye.